Close your eyes for a second. Seriously, just for a moment. I want you to imagine a world. Well, a world without us. No humans. No bustling Mumbai local trains at rush hour. No traffic jams in Bangalore. No farmers in the Punjab plains. Just, silence.
Trees growing, rivers flowing, storms raging. It sounds almost serene, doesn't it?
It does. But here is the philosophical question that kicks off the source material we have in front of us today. In that silent world, does a resource actually exist?
Right.
If a storm hits a coast and no one is there to lose a home, is it a calamity or is it just weather?
That's a heavy place to start. It's the classic if a tree falls in a forest riddle, but applied to national economies and geography.
And the answer our source material gives is a hard no. Coal is just a black rock until a human creates the technology to burn it for energy.
A river is just water flowing downhill until a human decides, hey, let's build a dam here.
We are at the pivot point. We define the value, the meaning of everything on the earth.
And that is exactly why we are here today. We aren't looking at rocks or rivers. We're looking at the observers themselves, the participants, the creators of culture and the consumers of resources.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are tackling the people factor. And this is a special deep dive curated by the team at Simplified UPSC by PPP. We are going to be stripping down Chapter 6 of the Class 9 Geography NCERT text, simply titled Population.
And look, I know what some of you listening might be thinking. Class 9, I'm preparing for the civil services. Why are we going back to a 9th grade textbook?
Right.
But we're going to show you, line by line, how this single chapter is the absolute foundation for solving 15-mark mains questions that can stump even seasoned IAS aspirants.
We are not just reading numbers today, we're connecting them. We've got a whole stack of previous year questions, PYQs from 2013 all the way up to the 2025 papers. We're going to see how a simple sentence written for a 14-year-old evolves into a complex policy question for a future district magistrate.
But before we start crunching the billions, we do have some essential housekeeping from the Simplified UPSC headquarters. This is mandatory and frankly important because these guys put in a ton of work to curate all this.
Yeah, we'll keep it brief because we have so much data to get through.
Yeah.
If you are getting value from these deep dives, if we're saving you time and helping you connect the dots, please just take 1 second and subscribe to the YouTube channel.
It sounds like a small thing, but honestly, it's the fuel that keeps this entire engine running.
And for those of you who want to go that extra step, if you're in a position to, and you want to help us keep the lights on and the research team fed, please do consider supporting us on Patreon.
A massive, massive shout out to all of our existing supporters. You folks are the reason we can sit here and do this. We genuinely can't thank you enough.
And don't be a silent observer like that lump of coal we were talking about. Get involved.
Yeah, like the video, drop a comment, tell us what clicked for you, or maybe a connection you made that we missed. We really do read all of them.
Okay, one last thing on resources, then we dive in. The free notes for this deep dive, complete with practice PYQs, are up on the public Telegram channel right now. Go grab them.
But if you want the premium experience, and I'm talking access to all the videos in this series at once, organized premium notes, the detailed extra PYQs, and even model mains answers that show you exactly how to structure your writing,
then you need to DM us on that public Telegram channel to get into the private Telegram library.
It's basically a cheat code for serious aspirants. Okay, housekeeping done. Let's get into it. Let's look at the human race.
Let's start with the sheer magnitude of this thing, the size. The source material anchors us in the Census 2011 data. Now, I know it's 2026 and we have newer estimates, but for the exam and for the textbook's logic, 2011 is still our official baseline.
Right. Until the new census data is fully codified, 2011 is the rock we stand on, and the number on that rock is 1,210.6 million.
1.21 billion. That number is just... It's so big it becomes abstract. My brain kind of shuts down after the first few zeros. How do we even begin to visualize that?
Okay, we'll try this. That number accounts for 17.5% of the world's total population.
17.5%.
Yeah. So if you could magically line up every single human being on planet Earth, from New York to Tokyo to a village in Kenya, almost every sixth person standing in that line would be an Indian.
1 in every 6 people. That is staggering power in terms of human capital, right?
It should be. But here's the catch, and this is where the geography part of the NCERT comes in to ruin the party. We have 17.5% of the people, but how much of the world's land do we have to put them on?
Oh, this is the killer statistic.
This is it. We possess only 2.4% of the world's land area.
Just pause on that for a second. 17.5% of humanity packed onto 2.4% of the planet's crust.
That right there is the definition of a pressure cooker.
It's everything.
It is. And that single disparity, that massive gap between our share of people and our share of land, is arguably the root cause of almost every single environmental and infrastructural headache India faces.
So when you see a question of groundwater depletion or urban overcrowding or, forest encroachment,
You have to mentally trace it all the way back to the 17.5 versus 2.4 equation. It's the source code of the problem.
so we are squeezed. But I'm guessing we aren't squeezed evenly. It's not like everyone is standing shoulder to shoulder across the entire subcontinent, evenly spaced out like soldiers on a parade ground.
Not at all. The distribution is incredibly lopsided. The text points out that half of India's population, fully 50%, is crammed into just 5 states.
Half the country in just 5 states. Which ones?
Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra, Bihar, West Bengal, and Andhra Pradesh.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, take Uttar Pradesh. In 2011, it had 199 million people. If UP were its own country, it would have been the 5th most populous nation on Earth at that time.
That's wild. UP has more people than Russia.
Yeah.
Russia, which spans 11 time zones.
Exactly. And then on the flip side of that, you have the Himalayan states or the islands. Sikkim has just 0.6 million people. Lakshadweep has about 64,000.
So you have this massive oscillation between being completely overwhelmed with people and being, practically empty.
And that unevenness brings us to a term that geographers love and UPSC loves even more: density.
Right.
Density is the great equalizer in this discussion. It's the number of persons per unit area, usually per square kilometer. It tells you how tight the squeeze actually is on the ground.
So what's our national average?
In 2011, it was 382 persons per square kilometer.
382. Which honestly sounds high compared to, say, Canada or Australia, but it feels manageable.
But averages lie. The average depth of a river might be 4 feet, but you can still drown in the middle where it's 20 feet deep.
Good point.
If you look at Bihar, the density isn't 382. It's 11,102 persons per square kilometer.
1,102. That's almost 3 times the national average.
It is. And then you fly over to Arunachal Pradesh in the northeast, and the density drops to just 17.
17. 1-7. You could walk for an entire day and not see another soul.
Pretty much.
So, the obvious question, and the one that NCERT tries to answer, is why? Why are we all huddled together in Bihar and Bengal while Arunachal is basically empty? Is it just history, or is there something about the land itself?
History plays a part, for sure, but geography is the dictator here. The text breaks it down really simply into 3 main factors: terrain, climate, and soil. It's what I like to call the Goldilocks principle.
Explain that, the Goldilocks principle.
Well, look at the low-density areas: Arunachal, Mizoram, Jammu, and Kashmir. What do they all have in common?
Mountains, rugged terrain.
Exactly. Rugged terrain and often an unfavorable climate. It's too cold or too unpredictable. You can't easily grow rice on a 60-degree slope. You can't build a 6-lane highway through a glacier without enormous cost. So the population stays low. That's the too cold and too rugged porridge.
Okay, that makes sense.
Then you have the too dry or too rocky areas. Think of the peninsular states, parts of Rajasthan. You have shallow soils, rocky terrain, inconsistent rainfall. It can support life, but not in huge numbers, so you get a moderate density.
And then you have the just right zone.
The just right zone. The northern plains.
The Ganga Basin.
The northern plains and Kerala. Flatland, super easy to build on. Fertile alluvial soil, incredibly easy to grow food on. Abundant rainfall. It is the absolute perfect recipe for intensive agriculture. And where you have an abundance of food, you have an abundance of people.
This all seems like pretty basic logic, but I want to see how the exam actually tests this. Because, flatland is good for farming. Feels like something a 5th grader knows. Does the UPSC really ask this?
They do, but they don't ask you to state it. They ask you to apply it. This is a perfect example of how you can't just know the fact. You have to structure it into a formal argument.
Okay.
Let's look at 2025 GS1 question 17.
Read it out for us. Let's hear the exact language they use.
The question asked: discuss the distribution and density of population in the Ganga River Basin with special reference to land, soil, and water resources.
Wow. Okay, that is literally the chapter we are reading right now.
It is verbatim. The examiner isn't trying to trick you with some obscure detail. They are asking, can you explain the logic from Chapter 6 of the Class 9 NCERT, but for 15 marks?
So walk me through how a top-tier answer would be constructed using just this textbook.
Sure. You'd start with a strong introduction. You'd quote the high-density stats of the states in the Basin UP, Bihar, West Bengal. You'd drop that 1102 figure for Bihar right in there to show you know the data. Then the body of your answer would be divided into the 3 exact categories the question asked for.
Land, soil, and water.
Exactly. For land, you'd discuss how the flat terrain allows for dense transport networks like railways and roads and facilitates urban expansion. For soil, you talk about the rich, fertile alluvial deposits from the Ganga, which allow for multiple cropping cycles and high agricultural productivity.
Right, the Green Revolution belt.
Precisely. And for water, you'd mention the perennial nature of the river system and the abundant monsoon rainfall, ensuring water for both agriculture and human settlement. And then you wrap it up with a sharp conclusion, linking this high density to the immense pressure on these very resources today.
So if you skip this basic Class 9 chapter because you thought it was too simple, you literally just threw away 15 marks in the mains exam.
You did. The basics build the structure of your answer. The fancy current affairs and reports, they're just the garnish you add on top.
Okay, so that covers the where. We know where people are and why. Now let's talk about the when. Because populations aren't static statues, they're constantly changing. This brings us to section 2, growth.
And this is where people often get tripped up by the math. There are 2 very different ways to measure growth, and the text is very specific about distinguishing them. You have absolute increase, and you have annual growth rate.
I have to admit, I always get these mixed up. Break it down for me.
Okay, think of it like a bodybuilder gaining muscle. Absolute increase is the actual weight you gain. You step on the scale and say, I gained 5 kilograms this year. It's a magnitude. In population terms, it's simply the population of 2011 minus the population of 2001. It tells you how many new physical bodies are now demanding food, water, and jobs.
Okay, simple enough. And the rate.
The annual growth rate is the speed at which you are gaining that weight. It's the pace. It's like saying, I gained 2% of my total body weight. It's a percentage, not a hard number.
And the story of India's population is really a story of these 2 numbers kind of fighting each other, isn't it?
It's a complete paradox. Let's look at the timeline the book lays out. From 1951 to 1981, India was in what experts call a population explosion. The growth rate was accelerating. We were, in your analogy, gaining weight faster and faster every single year.
But then something changed. 1981.
1981 was the watershed moment. It was the turning point. After 81, thanks to better awareness, family planning programs, and rising education levels, the growth rate started to decline. We finally hit the brakes.
So problem solved, right? We started slowing down.
This is the paradox. We slowed the pace. But, and this is the critical part, even though the rate of growth went down, the absolute number of people we added every decade kept going up for a while.
Wait, how does that work? If the car is slowing down, how are we covering more distance than before?
Because the car itself is getting bigger and bigger. It's the power of the base population. Look, imagine you have 100 rupees in the bank. If you get a 10% interest rate, you earn 10 rupees. Simple. Now imagine you have 1 billion rupees. Even if the interest rate drops to a tiny 1%, you still earn 10 million rupees.
I see it now. The principal amount, our base population of 800 or 900 million at the time, was so gigantic that even a tiny growth rate produced a massive, massive number of new babies.
Precisely. We call this population momentum. Even when the fertility rate drops to replacement level, the sheer number of young people who are already born and are entering reproductive age ensures that the total numbers keep swelling for decades.
And that swelling is why the text predicts, and it sounds a bit ominous, that India will overtake China. The text here says by 2045, but we know, looking at 2024 data, we've effectively already crossed that line.
We have. We are now the most populous nation on Earth. The textbook was conservative, but the momentum it described was even stronger than predicted.
So we have this massive engine that is, yes, slowing down, but it's still churning out millions of new passengers every year. What are the actual gears turning this machine? That leads us to the 3 processes of change.
Right. The 3 fundamental levers that determine if a population grows, shrinks, or stays the same: births, deaths, and migration. The first 2 births minus deaths give you what's called the natural increase.
And the story there is interesting because the common assumption is to blame too many babies for overpopulation, but the text actually says something different about India's history.
It does. It points out that historically the main driver of India's population growth wasn't just that we were having more babies, it's that we stopped dying.
We stopped dying. That sounds a bit dramatic.
Well, in the early 20th century, death rates were absolutely massive. We had famines, plagues, epidemics, poor public health. Death was common and early. But post-independence, we got really, really good at death control. We crushed epidemics with vaccines. We improved sanitation and access to basic medicine.
So the death rate just plummeted, but the birth rate stayed stubbornly high for a long time.
Exactly. And that gap, that widening jaw between the rapidly falling death line and the relatively flat birth line, is what caused the population explosion from the 50s to the 80s. It's only in recent decades that the birth rate has really started to chase the death rate downwards.
Which explains that 1981 turning point we talked about.
Yeah.
But let's get to the third lever, the one that doesn't create new people but just shuffles them around the country: migration.
And migration is absolutely crucial for the UPSC. You see, internal migration, someone moving from a village in Bihar to work in Mumbai, doesn't change the total population of India. The final count is the same.
Right.
But it completely changes the distribution. It redraws the population map in real time.
It empties out the village and completely chokes the city.
Correct. And the text introduces the classic geographical mechanism for this: push and pull factors.
Let's break those down.
Push factors are the negative things that kick you out of your home. And it's not just poverty in the abstract, it's the collapse of traditional livelihoods, like farming becoming unprofitable. It's the lack of a decent school for your kids. It's the absence of a hospital. In some areas, it can even be social factors like caste depression.
So it's everything that makes you want to leave.
Yeah.
What about the pull factors?
Those are the magnets of the city. The primary one is the hope of a job, any job. But it's also the perception of better living conditions, better hospitals, better schools, or sometimes just the neon light effect. The idea that life is simply more exciting and modern in Delhi or Mumbai.
And this massive movement of people has triggered a huge wave of urbanization. The stats in the book are stark.
They really are. In 1951, only about 17% of Indians lived in cities. By 2011, that figure had shot up to nearly 32%. We effectively doubled the urban share of our population.
And the cities themselves got bigger.
Massively bigger. Look at the million-plus cities. These are cities with more than 1 million people. We went from having 35 of them in 2001 to 53 in 2011.
That's 18 huge new metropolises springing up in just 10 years. That's a governance nightmare. It's a disaster management issue.
And it's a favorite UPSC topic. Let's connect this directly to the exams.
Let's do it.
Look at 2014 GS1, question 11. It asked to discuss the changes and trends of labor migration. That is a direct prompt to analyze this rural to urban shift we just discussed using the push-pull framework.
But it surely goes deeper than that, right? It must connect to the consequences of that migration.
Oh, absolutely. Think about it logically. When millions of people move to cities that aren't structurally ready for them, what do you get?
You get slums, you get unauthorized colonies, you get a collapse of urban services like water and sanitation.
Exactly. And this links directly to 2016 GS1 question 11 on the Smart City program, and even more recently to 2025 GS1 question 8.
The 2025 question was about smart cities and poverty, wasn't it?
Yes, it asked, how do smart cities address the problem of urban poverty and marginalization? Now, you can't just talk about Wi-Fi hotspots and automated traffic lights in your answer. You have to build the chain of logic.
Walk me through it.
1. The NCERT chapter explains why people migrate, the push and pull factors. 2. The result of this migration is that they arrive in cities, find no affordable housing, and this creates slums leading to urban poverty. 3. The policy response from the government is the Smart Cities mission, which aims to fix this density and lack of services.
So you can't actually give a good answer to the smart cities question unless you understand the root demographic cause, the migration pressure that's discussed in this very chapter.
Precisely. If you just memorize the Smart City guidelines, your answer is shallow and technical. But if you connect it to the fundamental demographic pressure of rural-urban migration, your answer has depth. You show the examiner you understand the source of the problem, not just the technological band-aid being applied to it.
That is a brilliant linkage. It connects a farmer's decision in a village to a high-tech urban plan in the capital.
Oh.
Okay, we've talked about the how many and the where, but now we need to talk about the who. Who are these 1.2 billion people? Are they old, young, men, women?
Yeah, right. Section 4, age composition. And this is where the famous and often misunderstood concept of the demographic dividend lives or dies.
Okay.
The census groups the population into 3 broad buckets. First, you have the children, aged 0 to 15 years. The text calls them economically unproductive.
Which is a polite, bureaucratic way of saying they're a cost center. They need food, clothes, schools, vaccines, but they don't produce any GDP.
Correct. In 2011, they made up 34.4% of India. That's more than a third of the entire country just consuming resources and needing care.
Okay, what's the next group?
Let's skip to the other end of the spectrum first. The aged, who are 59 years and older. In 2011, they were 6.9% of the population. They're generally retired, might have more health issues, and are also, in an economic sense, dependent.
So you have the kids and the elderly both relying on the middle group.
The middle group, the working age population from 15 to 59 years. This is the engine room of the economy. They were 58.7% of the population. These are the people working in factories, writing code, farming the land, paying taxes, and biologically, they're also the ones reproducing.
And this ratio, the number of workers versus the number of dependents, is what we call the dependency ratio.
Exactly. And herein lies the famous demographic dividend. The theory is simple. If you have a massive bulge of people in that working age group, which India does, and a shrinking number of dependents at both ends, your economy should skyrocket.
Why?
Because you have more hands to work and fewer mouths to feed. Savings rates should go up, investment should increase, and the economy should boom.
It sounds like a guaranteed win, a
Yeah.
golden ticket for development. But the UPSC loves to poke holes in guaranteed wins.
Oh, they absolutely do. Look no further than 2016 GS2 question 16. It threw a bucket of cold water on this whole optimistic idea.
What did it say?
It stated, and I'm quoting here, demographic dividend in India will remain only theoretical unless our manpower becomes more educated, aware, skilled, and creative.
Remain only theoretical. That is a brutal phrase from an examiner.
But it's deadly accurate. The NCERT gives us the quantity. It tells us we have 58.7% of our population in the working age bracket. Hooray! But the PYQ immediately challenges us on the quality.
Right.
What if that 58% is largely illiterate? What if they are malnourished and unhealthy? What if they don't have the technical skills for a modern economy? Then they aren't an asset. They are a massive liability. Unemployed, unskilled youth isn't a dividend. It's a recipe for social unrest.
So the text gives you the raw numbers to prove we have the potential. But the exam asks you to critically analyze if we are wasting that potential.
Perfectly put.
Yeah.
And we can't ignore the other end of that spectrum, the aged. 6.9% sounds like a small number, but in a country of 1.2 billion, that is over 80 million elderly people. That's more than the entire population of Germany.
And that group is growing fast as our life expectancy continues to rise.
And they are increasingly vulnerable. This connects to a fascinating question from 2013 GS1, question 17. Critically examine the effect of globalization on the aged population in India.
That's a really interesting angle. How does this basic NCERT chapter help you tackle a question like that?
Well, the NCERT defines the aged as a dependent group. They need care and support. Now, you bring in your sociological knowledge, which is built on these demographics. What did globalization accelerate?
Migration.
Migration, which we just discussed. The pull factors of globalization mean young people leave their villages for jobs in cities or even go abroad. So who gets left behind in the village?
Their parents.
The elderly.
Exactly. The traditional joint family structure, which was the de facto social security system, starts to break down. The security of having your kids around in your old age just vanishes. So you have a growing slice of the population pie chart. The aged, who are becoming increasingly isolated and vulnerable because of the economic movement of the working age slice. The demographics tell the story of a looming social crisis. It's tragic, but it really makes the data come alive. It's not just a pie chart anymore. It's a picture of lonely parents in a village. Now, speaking of vulnerable groups, there is one statistic in India that has always been, frankly, a badge of national shame. The sex ratio.
This is the one number that exposes the deep-seated cultural issues that development hasn't fixed. The sex ratio is defined as the number of females per 1,000 males. In a purely biological world, nature balances this out. It should be roughly 1,000 or even slightly higher for women, since they biologically tend to live longer than men.
But in India?
In India, the trend has been deeply disturbing. In 1951, we had 946 women for every 1,000 men.
Already a deficit.
A significant deficit. But by 2011, instead of improving with 60 years of so-called development, it had dropped to 943.
Wait, we actually went backwards. After 60 years of independence, democracy, and economic growth, we have fewer women relative to men than we did at the start.
We did. And if you zoom in on the map of India, the story gets even stranger and more paradoxical. You have states like Kerala, which is the star people, a sex ratio of 1084, more women than men. It correlates with high literacy, high health standards. But then you look at the economically rich states. Look at the developed north. Delhi, 866. Haryana, 877.
Hold on. Delhi and Haryana are wealthy states. They have high per capita income, tractors, industries, malls. Why on earth is their sex ratio worse than some much poorer states?
Yeah.
It feels like it should be the complete opposite. Money usually buys better healthcare and education, which should help women survive.
And that is the paradox. And the UPSC hit this nail right on the head. In 2014 GS1 question 12, the question was, why do some of the most prosperous regions of India have an adverse sex ratio for women?
That is a direct hit on Haryana, Punjab, and Delhi.
It completely challenges the simplistic assumption that money equals social progress. In fact, in these agrarian, highly patriarchal belts, prosperity sometimes works against women, because rich families can afford the technology for illegal sex determination tests. And rich land-owning families are often the most obsessed with passing down that land to a male heir. So, ironically, their newfound development actually funded the selective elimination of the girl child.
That is just chilling. It really separates the idea of economic growth from social development.
Exactly. And there was another fascinating comparison in the exams that year, 2014 GS1, question 10. It asked why the sex ratio in tribal communities is generally better than in scheduled caste communities.
And the answer there lies in the culture, right? Not the economics.
Yes. The NCERT doesn't explicitly detail tribal sociology, but it gives you the headline sex ratio data. To answer that question, you have to connect it with your sociology knowledge. You have to know that many tribal societies have less rigid patriarchal hierarchies. They don't have the same crushing dowry burdens or land inheritance obsessions that you see in caste-based agrarian societies. And so the girl child is more likely to survive and be valued.
Again, the number 943 is just the door. You have to walk through that door to see the complex culture that lives inside. Okay, we've covered age and sex. Now let's look at the quality of the population. We touched on this with the demographic dividend, but let's get specific. Literacy and occupation.
Literacy is the baseline for everything. The census defines a literate person as anyone aged 7 or older who can read and write with understanding in any language. By 2011, we had hit 73% national literacy.
Which is, a passing grade, but it's not a distinction, is it?
No, and the internal split is still very worrying. For males, the rate was 80.9%, but for females, it was only 64.6%. That significant gap explains so much about female workforce participation, health outcomes, and everything else we see down the line.
Speaking of the workforce, let's look at the occupational structure. What are these 1.2 billion people actually doing all day to earn a living?
This is where the image of modern digital India clashes hard with reality. We talk about being an IT superpower, and we are, but the data tells a different story about the majority of our people. The primary sector, that's agriculture, forestry, fishing, mining, employed 64% of India's workforce in 2011.
Two-thirds. Almost 2 out of every 3 working Indians are still, in some way, digging the earth or tilling the soil.
Yes. Compare that to developed nations where agriculture might employ 2%, maybe 5% of the population. We're still overwhelmingly an agrarian society in terms of employment, even if agriculture's contribution to our national GDP is shrinking.
And the other sectors?
The secondary sector, which is manufacturing and industry, was at about 13%, and the tertiary or services sector was at 20%. The book notes that we're seeing a shift towards secondary and tertiary, but that 64% in agriculture is a massive, stubborn number.
And it connects right back to what we discussed earlier, migration. Well, if 64% of the population is technically in farming, but we also know that men are migrating from villages to cities for construction or factory jobs. Who is actually left on the farm?
This is the brilliant synthesis. This is where you connect the dots. This leads directly to a question from 2014 GS1, question 14 on the feminization of agriculture.
Let's trace that logic.
It flows perfectly. 1, the occupation stat tells us most jobs are in farming. 2, the migration stat tells us men are moving to cities for cash income, driven by the push and pull factors. 3, the result is that the women are left behind in the villages. They take over the tillage, the sowing, the harvesting, the entire management of the farm.
So agriculture becomes a predominantly female-dominated activity in many rural belts, even though the women often don't even own the land title.
It's like a puzzle. You take the migration piece from one part of the chapter, fit it with the occupation piece from another, and suddenly you see this clear picture of the modern Indian woman farmer.
Amazing. Okay, we've broken down the demographics, but none of this matters if the population is sick or dying. We need to talk about health.
Health is the crucial software update. You can have all the hardware you want, the bodies, the youth bulge, but if the software, which is health, is buggy and slow, The whole system fails to perform.
And what's the story there? The good news first.
The good news is incredible. We have made massive, massive strides. The death rate dropped from 25 per thousand in 1951 to just 7.2 in 2011.
Wow.
And life expectancy more than doubled from a shocking 36.7 years to nearly 68 years in the same period.
36 years.
Yeah.
Can you even imagine a world where the average person dies before they hit 40? That was India just 2 generations ago.
It's a monumental public health achievement, but the NCERT doesn't let us rest on our laurels. It immediately points out that per capita calorie consumption is still below recommended levels. Malnutrition is rampant.
Then there was another shocking stat.
Yes, safe drinking water and basic sanitation are available to only 1/3 of the rural population.
1/3. That explains why our disease burden from waterborne illnesses is still so high. You can cure the plague with a vaccine, but if people are drinking contaminated water every day, they will just keep getting sick.
And this health deficit specifically targets the one group we need to be the strongest, the adolescents.
The text gives them their own special section. Why single out the 10 to 19-year-olds so specifically?
Because they are the youth bulge. They are about 1/5 of our total population. They are the future demographic dividend we keep talking about. They are our future. But the text waves a giant red flag.
And that red flag is?
Anemia. A high prevalence of anemia, which is iron deficiency among adolescent girls.
And this is a vicious cycle, isn't it? An anemic girl grows up to become an anemic mother.
Who then gives birth to a low birth weight maybe, who is more likely to grow up stunted, both physically and cognitively. It's an intergenerational cycle of poor health and lost potential.
So if you don't fix the health and nutrition of the adolescent girl, you are basically sabotaging the economy of the next generation before it's even born.
You are. The text explicitly calls for better nutrition for this group, and crucially for promoting delayed marriage and childbirth.
Which brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, the solution. The government didn't just sit there and watch all this happen. They created a policy framework, the NPP 2000.
The National Population Policy of the year 2000. This was the big one. It laid out a comprehensive roadmap to tackle all these issues.
What were some of its goals?
Well, it was a whole checklist to fix almost every problem we've discussed in this deep dive. It called for free and compulsory education up to 14 years.
To fix the literacy rates.
Exactly. It aimed to reduce the infant mortality rate, the IMR, to below 30 per thousand.
To improve child health.
It called for universal immunization against all vaccine-preventable diseases. It specifically promoted delayed marriage for girls, ideally after 18 and preferably after 12.
Tackling the adolescent health and sex ratio issues.
Yes. And it wanted to make family welfare a people-centered program, moving away from the top-down coercive methods of the past. It specifically highlighted the need for nutritional services and legal protection for that critical adolescent demographic.
So it's the blueprint.
Right.
But as we've seen with all the PYQs, a policy is only as good as its implementation on the ground.
That's always the challenge.
We have covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
The, 1.21 billion people, the where, the intense density squeeze in the plains, the how, the paradox of slowing growth rates but continued absolute increase, and the who, the complex divides of age, sex, and occupation.
And I think we've clearly shown that the UPSC doesn't care about the number 1.21 billion as a trivia fact. They care about what that number means. They care about the pressure it puts on the Ganga Basin. They care about the slums it creates through migration. They care about the women it leaves behind in the fields.
And I think the core takeaway from this entire deep dive is really that final provocative thought that the source material leaves us with. We have the numbers, we're overtaking China, we have this massive youth bulge, but is this population a resource or is it a disaster?
That is the multi-trillion-dollar question. A healthy, educated, skilled billion-plus population is a global superpower, no question. But a malnourished, illiterate, unskilled billion-plus is a ticking time bomb. The answer doesn't lie in the census count. It lies in those quality sections we discussed: health, education, and skills.
It's the difference between a demographic dividend and a demographic burden. And that is where the real hard work of governance happens every single day. Well, that brings us to the end of this deep dive into Chapter 6. We really hope this helped you see the matrix behind the numbers, the stories behind the statistics.
And before we sign off, just a quick final reminder from the Simplified UPSC team. If this breakdown helped you connect the dots, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. It's a small click for you, but it means the world to the team that puts this together.
And if you are in a position to, please do consider supporting them on Patreon. A huge final shout out again to the supporters who are already there. You guys are absolute legends.
Don't forget to like, comment, and share. And for the notes, head to the public Telegram channel for the free stuff. But for the premium organized notes, the model answers, and the full video library, you need to DM on Telegram to join the private library.
Keep learning, keep questioning, and remember, you are a part of that 1.21 billion. Make your one count.
We'll see you in the next deep dive.